This happened when I was 23 years old, about 8 months after. I moved into my first real house, the kind of place you convince yourself is a fresh start, even when it creaks and groans like it's warning you. I just finished college, landed a job that paid well enough to keep me afloat, and decided I was done living with roommates. The house was older, built sometime in the late 70s, sitting at the edge of a quiet neighborhood where the streetlights barely reached the sidewalks. It had one floor, a small backyard that backed into a strip of woods, and a basement that took up the entire footprint of the house. The landlord described the basement as unfinished but spacious, which turned out to be a polite way of saying it was dark, maze-like, and divided into strange sections with plywood walls that didn't quite reach the ceiling. There was a main open area at the bottom of the stairs, a laundry corner, a narrow storage room, and then a larger back section that disappeared into shadows no matter how many lights were on. I didn't mind it at first. I used it to store boxes, old furniture, and things I didn't want cluttering my living space. For the first few months, everything was normal. I worked, came home, cooked dinner, watched TV, slept, and repeated the cycle. I liked the quiet. I liked being alone. That's probably why it took me so long to realize something was wrong. It started with little things, the kind of details you brush off because they're easier to ignore than confront. The basement light would be on when I came home, even though I was sure I hadn't gone down there. A box I remembered pushing against the wall would be a few inches out of place. Once, I found one of my old jackets on the floor near the stairs, even though I distinctly remembered packing it away. I told myself I was misremembering. Stressed as that to you? Then there were the sounds. Late at night, usually when I was lying in bed with the lights off, I'd hear faint shuffling from below. Not loud enough to be footsteps, not sharp enough to be a bang, just a soft dragging noise, like something being moved slowly across concrete. Old houses make noise, I told myself. Pipes knock, wood expands. Still, I started locking my bedroom door, which felt ridiculous at the time. The night everything changed was a Thursday. I remember because I'd stayed late at work and came home exhausted, only to realize I had no clean clothes for the next day. Annoyed, I grabbed my laundry basket and headed for the basement. When I opened the door, the first thing I noticed was the smell. It was faint but unmistakable, a mix of sweat, mildew, and something sour, like food left out too long. The basement light was already on. I paused, my hand still on the doorframe, but instead of listening to my instincts, I stepped inside. Halfway down the stairs, I felt that uncomfortable sensation you get when you know you're not alone. At the bottom, I glanced toward the back section of the basement and saw movement near one of the plywood partitions. It was subtle, just a shift in shadow, but it was enough to make my heart jump. I stood there, frozen, listening, then I saw him. A man was crouched behind one of the folding tables I used for storage, his eyes locked onto mine. His face was gaunt, his hair matted, his clothes filthy, like he'd been wearing them for weeks. For a split second, neither of us moved. Then he stood up and ran deeper into the basement, disappearing behind the plywood walls. That broke whatever spell I was under, and I backed toward the stairs, my legs shaking so badly I nearly fell. Before I could take more than a few steps, the basement lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed everything. I panicked, stumbling forward, convinced I knew where the stairs were, only to trip over something and crash onto the concrete floor. The pain barely registered over the terror. I screamed, hoping the noise would scare him away, but instead I heard screaming in response, coming from somewhere in the darkness. It was loud, raw, and unhinged, and it echoed off the walls in a way that made it sound like he was everywhere at once. When I stopped screaming, he stopped too, like we were mirroring each other. I got to my feet and started moving blindly, using my hands to feel along the walls. I could hear him moving as well, his footsteps slow and deliberate, getting closer. I realized with a sickening certainty that he knew the layout of my basement better than I did. I smelled his breath before I heard it, hot and close behind me. Just as I thought he was about to grab me, my hand brushed against the wooden base of the staircase. Relief flooded through me, and I lunged upward, gripping the railing. I made it 2 steps before something seized my ankle and yanked me backward. I hit my head on the railing and tumbled down, stars exploding in my vision. He dragged me across the floor with terrifying strength, and I kicked and thrashed, my heel connecting with something solid. He grunted and let go just long enough for me to twist free and scramble back toward the stairs. I don't know how I found them again in the dark, but I did, and this time I didn't stop until I was at the top, slamming the door shut behind me and throwing my weight against it. The handle rattled violently as he hit the door from the other side, once, twice, again, and again. I was sobbing, my socks slipping on the floor, my arms burning as I pushed back with everything I had. Somehow he stopped. I heard his footsteps retreat down the stairs. I grabbed my phone from the counter and called the police, pressing my back against the door the entire time. When the officers arrived, they searched the house and the basement, but the man was gone. They found a forced window hidden behind bushes and signs that someone had been living down there for a long time. A filthy mattress, empty cans, food wrappers, and scribbles on the walls that made no sense. One officer told me the man likely knew my routine, knew when I'd be home and when I wouldn't. I moved out a month later, but the fear followed me. For months, I couldn't sleep without a light on. I jumped at every noise. I thought time would dull the memory, but it didn't. About a year later, I ran into my old landlord at a grocery store. He looked exhausted. He told me the new tenant had complained about noises in the basement too. One night, the tenant never came home from work. The police were called again. This time, they found someone in the basement. They didn't release many details, but they said the man had been hiding there for years, moving from house to house, living beneath people without them ever knowing. When I heard that, my blood ran cold. I realized how close I'd come to becoming just another missing person story, another name people whispered about online. Even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that if I hesitated for even one more second that night, I wouldn't be here to tell this story.
This happened when I was 22 years old, during the first year I lived alone. I'd just graduated and landed a job that paid just enough to move out of my parents' place. The house I rented wasn't anything special and older. Single-story home on the edge of town, quiet neighborhood, no close neighbors, cheap rent. At the time, that was all I cared about. The house had a basement. I remember the landlord brushing it off during the tour, saying it was mostly storage, a bit unfinished but solid. I didn't think much of it. Wasn't planning on spending time down there anyway. The basement was accessed through a door in the kitchen, steep wooden stairs. One bare bulb at the bottom, concrete floor, exposed beams. There were a few makeshift rooms sectioned off with old plywood, like someone had tried and failed to organize the space at some point. I used it to store boxes. That's it. For the first few months, nothing happened. Then small things started to feel off. Sometimes when I came home from work, the basement light would be on. I knew I hadn't used it. I told myself I probably forgot. Other times, boxes would look slightly moved. It's not enough to be obvious, just enough to make me second-guess my memory. I blamed stress, new job, new place, living alone for the first time. The noises were harder to explain. At night, usually after midnight, I'd hear faint sounds coming from below me, soft shuffling, a creak here and there. I convinced myself it was the house settling. Old homes make noise. Everyone knows that. Still, I started locking my bedroom door. The first truly terrifying incident happened on a Tuesday. I came home late, exhausted, and realized I'd forgotten to wash my work clothes. I sighed, grabbed my laundry basket, and opened the basement door. The light was already on. That should have been my cue to back away, but instead I walked down. Halfway down the stairs, I smelled something foul, like sweat mixed with damp concrete. Human, stale. When I reached the bottom, I froze. One of the plywood rooms, one I never went into, had its door slightly open, and something inside moved. Not fast, not sudden. Just enough to confirm someone was there. My heart started hammering, stood perfectly still, listening. The basement was silent now, like whoever was in there was listening too. I whispered hello. Immediately, the plywood door creaked shut. That's when the basement lights went out. Total darkness. I didn't scream. I didn't run. My body locked up completely. Panic hit so hard it felt like my chest was collapsing inward. Then I heard breathing. Close, too close. I spun around blindly and ran, slamming into shelves, tripping over boxes. My shin smashed against something hard and I went down on the concrete. Behind me were footsteps, bare feet slapping against the floor. I crawled, desperate, hands scraping concrete, until my fingers found the bottom stair. I dragged myself up, scrambling like an animal. Something grabbed my ankle. I screamed and kicked wildly, connecting with something solid. A grunt echoed in the darkness and the grip loosened just long enough for me to yank myself free. I didn't stop running until I was upstairs, slamming the basement door shut and throwing my entire weight against it. The handle rattled violently. Something slammed into the door from the other side once, twice, again. Each impact shook the frame. I was crying, hyperventilating. My phone was on the coffee table. I reached one hand out, never taking my weight off the door, and managed to grab it. I called 911. While I was on the phone, the banging stopped. Silence. The police arrived within minutes. They searched the basement with flashlights, guns drawn. No one was there. But they found something far worse. Inside one of the plywood rooms was a mattress on the floor, stained, moldy, recently used. Empty food containers, bottles filled with urine, scribbled on the plywood walls, random symbols and words that didn't make sense. Someone had been living in my basement for months. They found a basement window forced open behind some bushes outside, hidden perfectly from the road. The officer looked at me and said something I'll never forget. Whoever this was knew your schedule. I moved out 2 weeks later, but that's not the end. About 6 months after I left, I got a call from my old landlord. He sounded shaken. The new tenant had gone missing. They found the basement light on, and the plywood room occupied. This time, the police didn't find an escape route. They found a body. To this day, I don't know if it was the same person, but I know one thing for sure. That night, when the lights went out, I wasn't supposed to escape.